There's no seat for a middle-aged woman here. Go home. I attended the company party with my mother, Jane. We were having a good time, but then a rude employee named Betty hurled this insult at Jane. To make matters worse, her mother Kate was also acting arrogant. I felt intense anger rising within me, but before I could say anything, Jane spoke up. Betty, could you please call the highest-ranking person in this branch office? This single sentence triggered the collapse of Betty and her mother's standing. My name is Maria, a 48-year-old company employee. My father passed away 11 years ago, but my mother Jane is full of energy and runs a flower shop. It wasn't always a flower shop, though. She used to be a hard-working company employee. Even after retiring, the company wanted her to stay in some capacity, but she said, "It's not good for seniors to stay in the workplace forever. I want to take it easy now." So she retired. Then, wanting to work with the flowers she loved so much, she opened a flower shop. Ever since her days as a company employee, she would heal her heart by looking at flowers during tough times. Flowers don't talk, and that's what's good about them. They don't say unnecessary things, but they're beautiful. Just looking at them calms my heart, she would say. She often decorated our home with flowers and kept flowers on her desk at work. She seems to be enjoying every day now that she has her own shop. On my days off, I sometimes help out at Jane's store. It naturally gives us a chance to spend time together as mother and daughter, which is a great opportunity to communicate. Hearing all this, you might think everything sounds happy, but I'm actually troubled by someone at work. Her name is Betty. She works in the same branch office as me, in the same department. She's a young employee, currently 24 years old. Young people are supposed to bring energy to an organization, but Betty is the exact opposite. She causes trouble for various people and disrupts the workplace. For example, in her first year with the company, she was supposed to accompany me to a client's office for a business meeting. I had other work to do, so I arranged to meet directly at the client's office, but Betty never showed up even when the meeting was supposed to start. I tried calling her work smartphone, but couldn't get through at all, so I apologized to the client and started the meeting. Just when we were about to wrap up the meeting successfully. Sorry, I'm late. Betty showed up with a flippant attitude. On top of that, she was holding an ice cream cone in her hand and started licking it. Needless to say, the male employee from the client company had an incredulous look on his face. Not only are you late, but what's with that attitude? Even though he was angry, Betty remained unfazed. Why are you so mad? I was in line to buy the smartphone I wanted. That's why I'm late, that's all. Of course, there's no way the client would be satisfied with that explanation. Are you looking down on us? It only made him angrier. Anyone else would normally apologize, but Betty isn't normal. Wow, he's super pissed. Maybe he's curious about this ice cream? I bought it from a trendy shop that everyone's talking about. I'm definitely not giving it to you. She said something that provoked the client even more, making him even angrier. I'm terribly sorry. Betty, go home now. I gave that order. I came here to work, but this is just a waste of a trip. And kicked out Betty, who was whining. Afterwards, I desperately apologized to the client and somehow managed to conclude the business deal successfully. Even now, when I think about that time, I can't help but sigh. I never want to go through that again, but Betty doesn't consider other people's feelings. She's caused the same level of trouble multiple times, to the point where we've made it a rule not to let her interact with clients. You'd think someone like this would be fired, but Betty has a powerful ally, which is why she can't be disciplined. That ally is her mother, Kate. Kate is a department head at the head office, and she's had a strong voice within the company since joining due to her significant achievements. Naturally, no one at the branch office can go against her. Even Bob, the branch manager, can't speak up strongly against Kate. Betty takes advantage of this, and whenever something happens, "I'll tell Mom on you," she makes a fuss, saying. It's also troubling that Kate frequently comes to the office under the pretext of inspections. Betty mainly holds others back, so her work performance is quite poor. I wish her mother and boss, Kate, would scold her properly, but for some reason, it's always the employees around her who get yelled at instead. Betty worked so hard to get into college. If she's not thriving, it must be because of the bad environment around her. Kate says that loudly, but she didn't study much as a child and failed her college entrance exams. It seems she studied to take the exams again, but she couldn't focus on studying at all and was unemployed until she was 22. Then she got hired through Kate's connections and became a troublemaker. How do I know all this even though I'm not family? Because Betty blabbed about it herself. At the new employee welcome party, Betty called herself a hard worker. "I studied for an hour every day since I was a kid. Sometimes you need a break, so I took 4 days off a week though." Betty said that with full confidence, but I think anyone can clear an hour of study a day just by doing homework from school. An employee who went to a college prep school said it was normal to study for 8 hours a day on days off to pass the exams. Betty's amount of studying can't be called hard work. "I failed the college entrance exams in my senior year of high school, but I realized life isn't just about studying, so I did various things to broaden my horizons." The words themselves are good, but Betty said she'd attend a voice acting vocational school and quit after 2 months, said she'd go to a programming vocational school and dropped out after a month, repeating the pattern of giving up right after starting something. Because of that, time just passed and she ended up not learning anything. But the troublesome part is that Betty feels like she's accomplished something with this. Soon after joining the company, "I attended a computer vocational school, so even difficult tasks are easy," she used a computer, saying. But what Betty was doing was just using a spreadsheet to calculate sums and averages. It's something anyone in the company can do easily, not something to brag about every time. She makes a simple document. "I did it," and feels like she's done an amazing job, saying. Even if I want to ask her to do the next task, she won't budge, maybe because she's tired. Right now, making 3 documents a day is her limit, so her work performance is at the bottom. She really fits the term useless employee perfectly. But Betty's outrageous behavior doesn't end there. When I was helping out at Jane's flower shop on my day off, Betty and Kate showed up together. I had a bad feeling something was about to happen. "Welcome." But for the time being, I greeted them with a smile, saying. Betty made a face as soon as she saw me. "Why are you here?" "I came to find flowers to decorate my house, but this is the worst." "Oh, you're the employee who ruins Betty's hard work. Get out of here now." Even Kate suddenly hurled abuse at me, so I was fed up, but since they're important customers, I decided to treat them politely. "This is my mom's shop, and I help out on my days off." I explained that, but the next moment, Betty kicked over a bucket of flowers. Kate followed suit and slammed a potted plant on the floor. That plant wasn't merchandise, but a flower that Jane had been carefully growing. "Why would you do this?" I hurriedly set the bucket upright and rushed to the planter, but the floor was soaking wet, and the planter was beyond repair. Then Betty snickered nastily. "A store run by a nuisance should just go out of business. I just helped bring it closer to closing down." "That's right." I sense Betty's will, so I did something a bit rough. After that, this troublesome mother-daughter pair said to each other. I sympathized. Mom and I have great power together. But it's no joke. Moreover, Jane, who had finished delivering flowers, came back to the store and was stunned by the state of the shop. We wrecked the middle-aged woman's store for you. Let's go, Mom. Yes, Betty. I don't want flowers from a store like this, so let's go somewhere else. Bye, middle-aged woman. The two spat out hateful words and quickly left the store, but Jane and I were left to clean up the mess. While doing so, I explained what had happened, and Jane looked very sad. It's only natural since the flowers she had cherished were damaged. Those people. If they do something again, we'll need to take countermeasures. I thought what Jane said was obvious, so I agreed. For the time being, we decided to install security cameras, but unexpectedly, we had a rematch with Betty and Kate. One day, I attended a company party held at the head office. This party gathered not only head office employees, but also employees from all the branch offices. It's quite a grand event, with over 1,000 people attending in total. Only employees are allowed to participate, but I was permitted to go with my mom. The party started around the time I arrived 2 hours before the opening time and finished various preparations. At this party, the president of the head office splurges and provides quite delicious food. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet style, so there's nothing more appreciated than this. Jane may be getting older, but she still has a hearty appetite and loves meat. It's delicious, she says while eating roast beef. I'm also very happy to see her joyful face. However, people who ruin this mother-daughter time make an appearance. Needless to say, it's Betty and Kate. Poor people are rejoicing over cheap meat. You shouldn't end up like that, Betty. Hearing such horrible things, Jane and I had our moods ruined. We wished they would go away quickly, but they didn't care at all. Only employees are allowed to come to this party, right? So what are you doing here? Kate voiced that question. There's no seat for a middle-aged woman. Go home. And Betty even declared. Furthermore, with a swift motion, she snatched Jane's plate and slammed it on the floor. I threw away the cheap meat for you. It must be a feast for poor people. Oh, I'm so glad Betty has grown up to be such a kind girl. Betty and Kate snickered nastily while the staff hurried to clean up. With that, I finally reached my limit of patience. Whether she's a boss or her daughter, I'll get seriously angry at them. And I'll make them apologize to my mom. I was about to unleash those feelings of anger, but before that, my mom spoke up. Betty, could you call the highest-ranking person in your branch office for me? Those words triggered the collapse of Betty and Kate's standing in an instant. There's no way Betty would obediently listen to what Jane says. Calling for a higher-up, what a complainer. It's uncool for a senior to say that, so you should stop. Really, it's just as she says. You have common sense despite being young, how admirable. With Kate's encouragement, Betty grew even more confident in her own righteousness. Get lost, you complainer. She barked, her attitude becoming increasingly overbearing. But Jane refused to back down. Instead of spouting nonsense, go and fetch the branch manager right now. She demanded in a firm tone, not giving an inch. Jane exuded an overwhelming presence, creating an atmosphere that made it clear defiance would not be tolerated. Even the brazen Betty seemed to sense this. Huh? Why are you so angry? She asked. Well then, I'll go call them. The branch manager can't go against me, you know. With her thick-skinned personality, Kate made this provocative remark before going to summon the branch manager. 5 minutes later, the branch manager, Bob, appeared on the scene. He was trembling and breaking out in a cold sweat, having heard that his subordinates had caused trouble. I was told that they did something rude. Actually, as Jane explained the situation, Bob's face turned pale and he apologized profusely. I am truly sorry. It's unacceptable for them to treat you with such disrespect, Jane. What? Why are you apologizing so much? You're the branch manager, so you should be taking my side as your employee. Incredibly, Betty yelled at Bob. It was unthinkable for a regular employee like her to take such an insolent attitude towards her superior. While Betty's personality was clearly warped, having Kate by her side likely emboldened her to act so arrogantly. Even so, this situation was bizarre. Jane, too, seemed to notice the abnormality and furrowed her brow. I occasionally hear about the workplace from Maria, but Betty is even worse than I imagined. Huh? Don't butt in, you middle-aged hag. You want me to smash that cup of yours too? As Betty grew even more carried away, Bob's face turned visibly paler by the second. That's enough. Jane is a distinguished contributor who helped establish our branch office. What? What's that supposed to mean? Unable to follow the conversation, Betty stared in shock. This person was able to establish this branch office? That's why I'm telling you to stop with that rude attitude. Bob interjected, cutting Betty off and beginning to explain. Our company used to be a small office in a single room of a building. But when Jane joined us, our performance skyrocketed. She worked tirelessly as the first branch manager when we were setting up this branch. What? She was that good? Betty looked at Jane in surprise. The expression on her face was so crestfallen that I almost burst out laughing. That was over 40 years ago. She's retired now and runs a flower shop. She doesn't have much to do with the company anymore. But in recognition of her incredible contributions, we send her an invitation to our social gatherings every year. She hasn't been able to attend for the past few years due to various circumstances, but she made it this year. And yet, we've caused this commotion. Even the usually calm Bob glared at Betty in this moment. After all, he was an adult with a fair amount of experience under his belt. When he got seriously angry, he could be quite intimidating. I'm the daughter of the section manager. Do you think it's okay to take that attitude with me? Betty retorted, though she was clearly frightened. But it seemed that excuse wouldn't work anymore. Leave me out of this. Hurry up and apologize. Kate, Betty's last lifeline, had become completely cowed and started saying things like this. Jane is a legendary employee that even the higher-ups at headquarters are considerate of. And when you've been rude to someone, apologizing is the basic thing to do as a human being. Mom, you were making a fuss with me just a moment ago. What was that about? Betty was shaken to see Kate's sudden about-face. Both Jane and I were stunned by the drastic change in attitude, but Kate approached Jane with an awkward smile. You're Jane, right? I saw you at a social gathering a few years ago, but your aura is different. It's like you're a different person. Are you trying to say I've gotten old? Well, excuse me for that. Jane's mood soured completely upon hearing Kate's excuse. Stop saying stupid things and hurry up and apologize. When you've been rude to someone, apologizing is the basic thing to do as a human being, right? You're right. I'm terribly sorry. Kate apologized, but Betty didn't seem satisfied with this turn of events. Mom, aren't you apologizing too easily? I don't care if she's some legendary employee or whatever, she's already retired, right? It was an extremely rude remark, but I had my doubts as well. Did something happen between you and my mom in the past? You seem to be afraid of her. What? No, that's not. Kate tried to make excuses, but it seemed that Jane had noticed something. Could it be that you're the employee who broke the flower vase? What? I don't know anything about a pink flower vase. Seeing Kate's reaction, I was convinced that Jane was right. How do you know the color of the vase? Jane never mentioned anything about the color. Huh? Well, I just had a feeling that Jane might like the color pink, so I kind of assumed. Kate tried to brush it off with a flimsy excuse, but of course, it wasn't going to work. This habit of making excuses definitely proves that you're the culprit behind the flower vase incident, Jane declared, and began to recount the story. It was back when I was still working at this company. A young Kate got completely drunk at a party. It was my birthday party, but she was yelling things like, "Who cares about the birthday girl, Jane?" She even broke the pink flower vase I had received as a birthday present. How awful! That's not how a working adult should behave, I remarked, looking at Kate with a disgusted expression. Jane also let out a sigh. That day, Kate was in no condition to hold a conversation, so we just sent her home for the time being. The next day, she came to apologize, which was good, but she kept making one excuse after another, which only made me angrier. I am truly sorry for what happened back then. You scolded me so harshly, Jane, that I even had nightmares about it for a while. To think that she would forget about Jane even after going through such a frightening experience. I must have had a look of utter disbelief on my face. Perhaps sensing my gaze. I compensated for the flower vase, so let's just drop this story. Kate awkwardly tried to change the subject. Mom, you're so uncool. I can't believe you're the type of person who changes their stance so easily, Betty muttered, prompting Kate to glare at her. I've been covering for you all this time, and this is what you say? Huh? Isn't that what parents are supposed to do? Their children are the most precious to them, so it's only natural to go that far for them, Betty retorted with a brazen opinion. No matter how lacking in common sense Betty may be, I thought she at least had some affection for her mother. After all, Kate had been covering for her so much on a daily basis, and they seemed to get along well. I had imagined that Betty would have some sense of gratitude, but it seems she's the type to go beyond that. In a bad way, of course. As I looked on in disbelief, Kate finally lost her temper for real. Is that what you've been thinking all this time? I never thought you were such a heartless child. That's why I'm saying it's only natural for a parent to do that much. I can't muster up any compassion or thoughtfulness, you know? Think about all the hardships I've been through. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to raise you? It was true that Betty was a selfish person who still couldn't stand on her own 2 feet without relying on her parents. Anyone would find it unbearable to be with someone like this for years on end. You're not good at studying or sports, and you're always causing trouble at school. Have you ever considered how embarrassed and ashamed I've felt all this time? Kate continued, showing no signs of calming down. Her fury was unrelenting as she went on. Even after you graduated high school, I spent so much money sending you to all sorts of places, but you couldn't stick with anything. I had no choice but to get you a job through connections. You better pay back all the money I've spent on you. Finally, even Betty's face turned red with rage as Kate started saying these things. Shut up. If you're going to say that, then I won't rely on you anymore. I can live just fine on my own, Betty shouted back. Fine. Then get out of this house. They ended up saying these harsh words to each other before storming off in different directions. Bob promised to make sure they properly apologized and faced consequences later, but Jane and I were utterly exasperated with both Betty and Kate. Afterwards, on Bob's orders, they both were kicked out of the venue, so we were somehow able to enjoy the rest of the social gathering. But honestly, I never wanted to spend time with those two again. 1 week later, Jane and I visited a certain branch office. This place was known for being strict about work, and we had come to meet a particular person. However, while being led to the meeting, we heard a scream. The next moment, one of the doors burst open and Betty came flying out, hiding behind me.
I can't take it anymore. Stop that guy.
Betty pointed in the direction she had come from. Then, a large man over 6 feet tall emerged, and I recognized him.
Joe?
This was Joe, an employee who worked as a section manager at this branch. He had previously worked with me at my branch office and was someone I had gotten along well with, a motivated individual who brought energy to the department and was always considerate of others.
Well, if it isn't Maria and Jane. Thank you for taking the time to come all this way. I apologize for letting you see such an unsightly scene, Joe said. What happened? Betty came running over here.
At that, Joe was scary. Betty burst into tears, wailing. However, Joe wasn't the type to corner someone without reason. I figured Betty must have done something, so I decided to go into the room and hear the full story. By the way, Betty was transferred to this branch office the day after the social gathering. This was where problematic employees were sent, and Betty had also come here for re-education.
Telling me to move all of a sudden is seriously annoying,
Betty complained, but since she had been given special treatment until now, I wished she wouldn't complain too much. In reality, she should have been sent here much earlier, but it was only after Kate left that they were finally able to transfer her. The plan was for her to settle down after a week and then properly apologize to Jane and me. However, when we arrived, we stumbled upon this commotion.
Actually, I told her to create documents on the computer and make copies, but she snuck out on her own and went to the nearby convenience store. When I lectured her about it, she started crying, ran away, and sought help from Maria. That's how it unfolded, Joe explained, shaking his head in exasperation. No matter how you look at it, you are wrong.
I sighed, prompting Betty to cry even harder.
My salary has been cut, and I have no motivation at all. Plus, this place is in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere to go for fun. This is unbelievable. You're in no position to complain. You should be grateful they're still employing you when they could have fired you ages ago. Joe scolded her, his patience wearing thin.
At that, I quit. I can't do this anymore, Betty declared.
As a company, we don't mind if you quit since you're not being useful anyway.
I blurted out my true feelings, and Joe nodded in agreement.
Sorry, but that's exactly right. This is where employees who have nowhere else to go if they don't work hard are sent. If you say you can't put in the effort here, then you're better off quitting since there's nowhere else for you.
That's horrible.
It's troubling if you try to stop me, but being told so clearly that I'm unwanted still hurts in its own way,
Betty said, showing a complicated expression, but it was just annoying.
Stop blabbering and choose whether you're going to quit or work hard, Jane snapped, unable to take it anymore.
Betty's face contorted as she muttered, "I'll quit." And it was decided that she would really leave the company. If even Joe, who was known as the Rehabilitation Factory, was giving up on her, then quitting seemed like the best choice.
Before you go, make sure to properly apologize for what happened at the social gathering,
Joe prompted Betty.
I'm very sorry.
She apologized reluctantly. Realizing we couldn't expect anything more from her, Jane and I decided to end things there. We went back home, agreeing with each other that they were truly good-for-nothing mother and daughter. About 10 days later, while Jane and I were handling the work at the flower shop by ourselves, 2 people wearing hats suddenly entered the store.
Hand over the money! You're not allowed to resist!
Even though they were disguising their voices, I could tell they were both women. Jane and I were startled by the sudden intrusion, but I managed to say, "This store has security cameras, you know. We'll be calling the police." At that, they started to panic.
Huh? Wait a second. Is that true? Isn't calling the police against the rules?
Hearing their voices, I immediately realized who they were.
It's Betty and Kate, isn't it? Your voices have gone back to normal.
The moment they heard my words, the two figures, who were likely Betty and Kate, became even more flustered, so I was probably right.
This can't be happening. What should I do? Mom. Hey, don't call me Mom. They'll figure it out.
The woman who seemed to be Kate scolded the one who looked like Betty, but that pretty much confirmed it.
Do you want money? Or is this just a prank?
When I asked that,
I mean, sure, I want money, but just making you uncomfortable is enough for me.
Betty responded.
But you should at least hand over like $100. It's called manners.
Kate was spouting nonsense, but I retorted,
I don't want to give even a cent to people who barge in like this.
As I was engaging in this idiotic conversation,
I called the cops from the employee-only area phone. The police station is close by, so they should be here soon.
Jane appeared.
Oh my God! We gotta run!
As Maria and I opened the entrance door in unison, we were greeted by a crowd of 6 pedestrians gathered outside. This was a fairly busy area, and it was only natural for passers-by to become suspicious if we were fiddling around while wearing hats.
Hey, you're criminals, aren't you? Don't try to run away. We'll catch you.
2 energetic young men barged into the store and attempted to apprehend them.
Mom! Help us!
Betty and Kate resisted, but with more pedestrians arriving, they were easily caught. When the police arrived and swiftly put them into the patrol car, it was clear how foolish they had been. Reportedly, the 2 girls told the police the same motive for the crime as they had shared with me. After being fired from our company, Betty apparently ended up crying to Kate for help. Kate, too, had made a huge blunder at a company gathering of 1,000 people, leading to her demotion and loss of place in the company, ultimately resulting in her voluntary resignation. Unsure of what to do next, she had been holed up at home ever since. The company lamented that they wanted to make her apologize but couldn't get in touch, as she had been ignoring all communication during her period of seclusion. In any case, the 2 girls, having lost their place, reconciled and decided to stick together. However, they harbored a grudge against the mother and daughter at the flower shop, blaming them for their situation, and committed this foolish crime.
We just wanted some money and thought we'd threaten them a bit before leaving right away. We ended up staying longer than we imagined, and things turned out like this. We are truly sorry.
Betty and Kate came to the store a few days later to apologize. As there was no harm done and they showed remorse, they got away with a stern warning, but we couldn't help but feel disgusted by them.
This happened because of your own actions. Don't blame others and run away from responsibility. Stop interfering with Maria's life. You're no longer welcome in our store.
Upon hearing our words,
we are very sorry.
They responded in unison.
Maria works at the same company as me, but she hid the fact that she's my daughter and passed the entrance exam on her own merit. Even after joining, she's been working hard without relying on me. Betty and Kate, it's high time you left her alone,
Jane said in a stern tone.
Betty and Kate, you're too selfish. From now on, learn to be independent without blaming others. Otherwise, you'll always be stuck like this.
Yes. They both replied, hanging their heads, and trudged away. Finally, peace had returned to Jane and me. 2 months later, as I was walking near the park, I caught sight of Betty and Kate arguing loudly. "You're not my mom. Just go wherever you want." "Fine, I will. But I bet you can't survive on your own anyway." They were yelling at each other in such an ugly way. "You're practically living like a homeless person. Why don't you have any money? When we were living a normal life, you used to buy and use brand name products all the time. That was my reward for myself. I spent it all on your education." From their mention of not having money, it seemed like they were fighting over financial issues. Just when I thought they were being a nuisance in a public place. "Shut up!" A group of 3 delinquent-looking guys shouted at them. "We're sorry." They ran away with pitiful voices, but the guys didn't let them off and chased after them. "Hey, don't run away. The younger one is pretty cute. I want to make her my girlfriend." One of the guys said this, so who knows what would happen if they didn't manage to escape. But if I clumsily tried to help that mother and daughter, it was obvious they would demand money from me. I immediately left the park and returned home. Meanwhile, I'm still working as a company employee. Recently, my past achievements have been recognized and I was promoted to section manager. Although I'm just a branch section manager, my salary has increased compared to before. With Betty and Kate gone, it's become much easier to work and everything is great. Bob also said he wouldn't give special treatment to certain employees, and he's been properly following the company rules. Now that the problematic people are gone, he himself has a brighter expression too. Jane is also running a flower shop and looks happy as always, surrounded by flowers. "This flower is about to bloom soon. I'm sure it will be beautiful." Seeing her heart dancing like that makes me feel joy too. It's just an ordinary scene, but I'm living each day hoping this happiness will continue for as long as possible. On the day we celebrated the 50th wedding anniversary of our in-laws, I arrived late and pulled along my son to introduce him to Sael, Abigail. This is my son, Mark. Mark, say hello." "I'm Mark. I'm 5 years old." Mark clung to me and looked at Abigail, shyly greeting her. "Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability." Before I could finish, Abigail blurted out, "EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to my kids." In that moment, both Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband didn't say anything, but his look of discomfort was evident, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and rigid. I couldn't believe what was being said to such a young child, filled with disbelief. Not knowing what to say to the insensitive remarks of Abigail and her company, I stood there motionless until I heard a voice from beside me. "Do people hate me again?" Mark looked down, desperately trying to hold back tears. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. "It's not contagious. He has albinism, which just means he was born with less pigment. Still a disease, it can spread. Scarlett, get rid of that ugly kid fast. Get out." My husband was trembling with anger. During the heated argument, tears fell from Mark's eyes. Interrupting Kevin, who seemed ready to confront Abigail, Phil Robert spoke up. "That's enough. Don't ever come back." The relief was visible on Abigail and her husband's faces. They smiled triumphantly as if they had found someone who understood them. But their smiles quickly turned to surprise. "What? Dad, what are you doing?" My name is Harper, a 40-year-old housewife living with my husband, Kevin, and our son, Mark. Only 5 years ago, the thought of living happily as a family of 3 was unimaginable. Kevin and I had always wanted children but were unable to conceive. I desperately wanted a child, and so did Kevin, which led us to seek fertility treatments at a hospital. There were days when it was hard to see pregnant women in the waiting room, reminding me that children are a gift. Despite careful diet and health management, I often wondered why I couldn't have a child, leading to days filled with self-loathing. The fertility treatments were not only emotionally taxing but also a financial burden, leading to many tearful nights. During those times, the person who was always there to support me was none other than Kevin. His encouragement, holding my hand, and accompanying me to the hospital were incredibly reassuring. "It's okay, I'm sure our baby is just waiting for the right time to come to us." Miraculously, his words gave me hope, and I became more positive. The following year, our efforts paid off, and I became pregnant, sharing the news with in-laws Robert and Chloe, who were overjoyed. The baby grew healthy inside me, and we looked forward to the delivery day. On the day of birth, hearing the lively cries, I was deeply relieved and eagerly wished to see the baby's face. Yet, the child born had skin and hair so white and delicate, it seemed touching could break them, like an angel. Needless to say, Kevin and I were astonished. We were confused, as no one in our families had such an appearance.
Why?
The doctor explained our child had oculocutaneous albinism, a congenital condition known as albinism.
Albinism? The 1 in 20,000 people.
It's a disease associated not just with physical appearance but also vision problems and sensitivity to sunlight. I regretted not being able to give birth to a normal child after fertility treatments. However, seeing the baby, all that mattered faded away, and we embraced our child fully.
Doesn't matter if it's a rare disease. Our child is as beautiful and precious as an angel.
Exactly. This child chose us. Thank you, thank you. Thus, Kevin and I accepted our long-awaited baby positively and with hope. We named the child Mark and decided to raise him with love. Introducing him as our angel to the in-laws, they initially surprised, eventually warmed up to Mark's innocent smile. "It might be hard, but you two will surely overcome everything. If you ever need help, we're here for you." The in-laws accepted and promised to love and care for him together. Mark's main concerns were managing sunlight exposure and weak vision. When going outside, sunscreen is essential, and Mark also needs assistive devices for his vision. However, now, thanks to the internet, connecting with friends who share the same concerns has lessened the feeling of struggling alone. There are several considerations in Mark's life, but otherwise, he's a healthy and mischievous boy. Kevin and I are delighted to see Mark increasingly doing things on his own, and before we knew it, 4-5 years had flown by. During this time, we visited the in-laws' house for Christmas, long weekends, and whenever the timing was right. The in-laws live about a 10-minute bus ride away, and from the station, Robert always picks us up in his car, mindful of Mark's condition. "Thank you, always." "No problem. I can't wait to see my grandson." Once in the car, Mark always brightened up. Certainly, he liked cars, but there was a more pressing issue for him: the stares from others. When on the bus, some people would gawk or recoil at Mark's appearance, whispering or turning away. There were even times when people pointed their phone cameras at him, leading us to ask them to stop and shielding Mark from their view. Such actions deeply saddened me as a mother and sometimes made me angry, wondering why they would do such things. Affected by these stares, Mark would shrink into himself on the bus. Especially since turning 5, he would hide behind me or Kevin, or cling to Robert and Chloe, curling up small. Thinking how hard it must be for Mark himself tightened my chest with pain. One night, before bed, Mark asked, "Mom, Dad, am I weird? Does everyone dislike me? Why would you think that?" I replied, "Because, in the train, everyone looks at me so much." Hearing Mark express his feelings was heart-wrenching, and I've never felt more distressed. Kevin seemed troubled too, his brows slightly furrowed. I pulled Mark close, looked him in the eyes, and assured him, "You're not weird, and nobody dislikes you. Even if people look, you can hold your head high." With tears welling up in his eyes, he listened to my words and simply replied, "Okay, I understand. Mark, how about you sleep with Dad tonight?" "Okay. Read me a story?" Excited, Kevin headed to the bedroom with Mark. Watching them, I stayed in the living room, sighing. The 50th anniversary celebration for Robert and Chloe is coming up, and I'm a bit worried. At kindergarten, there are teachers to support and friends who are told about Mark's condition, which offers some comfort, but public places are a different story. Struggling with this challenge, discussing with friends, Mark, Kevin, and I were all searching for solutions. Recently, Kevin brought up the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of the in-laws. Abigail, my sister-in-law living far away, would be coming, and it was suggested we celebrate grandly with her family. Mark hasn't met Abigail yet. It might be a good opportunity, don't you think, Scarlett? Abigail too? Truthfully, I didn't have the best impression of Sale Abigail. Her family moves often due to her husband's job, and I've only met them once or twice. When Mark was born, I sent a letter but received no reply. Worried they didn't care about our family, I felt anxious about introducing Mark. When I shared my concerns, Kevin reassured me with a smile. "It'll be okay. Abigail isn't that bad, and her husband has always been nice to me." "Okay," I conceded, perhaps overly concerned about others' judgments. Maybe Abigail and her husband are genuinely kind, and the lack of response to my letter was just due to their circumstances. If they're coming all this way to celebrate their parents' 50th anniversary, we shouldn't dismiss their intent. While I could handle any comments about me, I worried whether Mark would be accepted or subjected to stares like on the bus, but we agreed to include Sael's family. And so, with lingering anxiety, we approached the day of the 50th anniversary celebration. Due to flight schedules, Sael's family would arrive later. For this special day, instead of Robert's car, Kevin and I escorted the in-laws to a high-end restaurant. Because we had a reservation, I said, "I'm Harper." And the receptionist led us to our room. Robert and Chloe, smiling happily, held Mark's hand as they walked to their seats. The stylish space, fitting about 10 people, was lit with soft lighting, creating a calm atmosphere. "Grandpa and Grandma are happy." "I'm happy too." "Yes, Mark is happy too." Mark seemed to understand today was special, smiling more than usual. He was dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, looking even cuter, which made the staff lady smile. After some time chatting, Sael's family arrived late. They appeared in formal attire, and Scarlett, Mark's cousin, was also dressed in a cute outfit. "Sorry we're late. Dad, Mom, congratulations today." Abigail dropped her bag and greeted Robert and Chloe. Of course, Abigail's husband and Scarlett smiled and said, "Congratulations." When they settled, I nervously greeted Sael's family. Abigail, long time no see. Thank you for coming all this way today." Right." However, she responded indifferently, as if she barely knew me. Gathering my courage, I brought Mark over to introduce him. This is my son, Mark." "Say hello, Mark." "I'm Mark, 5 years old." Mark clung to me and shyly greeted Abigail. "Abigail, as I mentioned in my letter, my son has a congenital disability." Before I could finish, Abigail bluntly said, "EW, what a monster. Don't let it spread to us." Instantly, Mark and I froze as if time had stopped. Abigail's husband, without saying a word, clearly looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to keep his distance. Kevin and the in-laws were speechless and stiff. I was filled with disbelief at what was said to such a young child. Not knowing what to say to the inconsiderate Abigails, I stood there motionless, but then I was brought back to reality by a voice from beside me. Am I disliked again? Mark looked anxious, holding my hand. Laughing, Abigail said, "Yeah, nobody wants to see Mark's face." Mark looked down, trying hard not to cry. Such words would hurt an adult, let alone a child. I thought about slapping Abigail right there, but hugged Mark tightly instead. "What are you saying, Abigail? That's not true." "That's right. Abigail, how could you say that?" Chloe hugged me and Mark in defense. What? Mom, you're defending that monster? It's gross, like, it's all white and has white hair. Is it contagious? Get it away if it's going to spread. It's not contagious. It doesn't spread. He has albinism, a condition of being born with less pigment. So, it is a disease. It could spread. Why did you bring him? Stay away. Scarlett, stay back. Abigail, don't say that. Mark is not a monster, nor is it contagious. Don't treat him like a leper. Kevin, is that really your child? Unbelievable. Why don't you understand, Abigail? Just get rid of that ugly kid, fast. Get out. Kevin's hands trembled with anger. During the heated argument, tears streamed down Mark's face. Intervening before Kevin could confront Abigail, Robert spoke up. That's enough. Don't ever come back. Relieved were only Abigail and her husband. They seemed to have found an ally, their faces wearing a triumphant look as if to say so. But that smile quickly vanished, turning into a look of surprise. What? Dad, what are you doing? Robert had grabbed Abigail and her husband's bags and threw them out of the room. Then, after clapping his hands together, he turned back to the astonished couple. To treat a polite child who greeted you upon meeting for the first time like this. That's not my daughter. You are the monsters. I don't want to see such ugly faces. But Dad, what if you and Mom catch it? I'm worried. No need to worry. If you had the heart to worry about me, you could have considered Mark's feelings too. Why didn't you? No, come on, that's just not normal, no matter how you look at it. Stop saying such heartless things. Get out now. Abigail's couple was taken aback by Robert's demeanor, unseen by Kevin and me before. They seemed to want to say something more, but then a voice exclaimed, "Stop it!" All eyes, including Kevin's, turned to the source. Surprisingly, it was Scarlett, dressed in her cute outfit. Her cheeks flushed. Albinism isn't contagious, and he's not a monster. Why would you say that? Dad and Mom, that's awful. She declared this with all her might, tears streaming down her face. That alone showed she was angry and hurt for Mark, which made me incredibly happy. Yet, Abigail harshly responded to her daughter. Scarlett, be quiet. You don't know anything. You're the one who doesn't know anything, Mom. I'm so embarrassed right now. Hating Mark without even trying to understand him. I hate a mom and dad like that. Scarlett's almost shouting voice turned Abigail's couple pale. Undeterred, Scarlett ran to Mark, towering slightly like an older sister, and gently stroked his head. Don't cry. You should smile. You're not a monster, and you're not disliked. The people who say that are wrong. Yeah. Both Scarlett and Mark's faces were smeared with tears and runny noses. It was difficult to get Abigail and her husband to understand Mark, but Scarlett was different, which was reassuring. Seeing Scarlett approach Mark and pat his head, Abigail seemed to snap out of it, hastily leaving with her husband without a word. The commotion drew the attention of other patrons outside, likely making Abigail's family feel unwelcome. While some staff members asked patrons to return to their seats, we resumed our conversation as if nothing had happened. The rest of the meal went smoothly, without tears or derogatory words, marking a peaceful time. After the 50th wedding anniversary celebration ended, and we returned to our usual lives, I was struck by a question. How did Scarlett know about albinism?
Kevin, did you talk to her on the phone?
No, I haven't. I thought you had told her, Harper.
Wondering how she knew about Mark without us telling her, we received a letter. The sender was Scarlett, who had apparently gotten our address from Robert and Chloe. The letter, written on cute heart pattern stationery like that of a young girl, contained her earnest words. After dinner that day, we decided to read the letter together. The letter began with "To Mark's mom and dad," sharing Scarlett's personal thoughts on people with albinism. Scarlett, due to her parents' moves, had changed schools several times, about 3 in total. At one of her previous schools, there was a child with albinism similar to Mark. This child had white hair and wore special glasses for poor vision, but after the teacher's explanation, all classmates respected and treated the child well. And Scarlett liked that child. Without discrimination against anyone, not minding their own disability, and being kind to everyone, she found them genuinely cool and fell for them.
Even with poor eyesight, they had great hearing, were good at singing, and could play the piano. I wanted to be as kind as them, but Mom was different.
On a day when parents gathered, seeing the albino child with Scarlett, Abigail frowned immediately.
Scarlett, who's that child? Dyeing hair in elementary school? And those ugly glasses don't suit at all. You shouldn't play with that child, okay? Understand?
Saying so, she complained. Scarlett was filled with disbelief and felt very upset. Shocked and frustrated at her inability to retort her mother's heartless words.
So, I felt relieved when I could finally speak up about Mark.
Reading the letter made me feel warm, realizing Scarlett had been harboring those feelings during the 50th wedding anniversary celebration. Later, Scarlett settled in her current school and, driven by a desire to be understood, read an essay on albino awareness during an open class.
My parents labeled my cousin a monster without trying to understand albinism. I think those who say such things have monstrous hearts.
I hope more people understand albinism and refrain from saying terrible things like my parents did. I wish for a class where everyone respects each other as they did at my previous school, where a composition read on open day, advocating for mutual respect, was highly praised. At the same time, Abigail and her husband faced condemning stares and were embarrassed. Following that open day, they were viewed coldly by other parents in the neighborhood, and Scarlett was scolded by Abigail. But she seemed unfazed, hoping to grow up to be someone who can eloquently explain and support people with albinism.
Please be kind and stand tall, Mark. I'll do my best too. See you.
The letter ended with this message, accompanied by a cartoon character sticker that seemed like it could come from a girl's magazine, saying, "Your ally." Of course, Mark still can't read well, nor does he fully understand the meaning of the words. But when I carefully explained how to read it, Mark, with a happy smile, excitedly shouted,
Ally, ally.
Seeing this made both Kevin and I happy, and we all ended up laughing together. In fact, since the day of the 50th wedding anniversary celebration, Mark, perhaps remembering Scarlett's words, has always stood tall, never shrinking, whether on the bus or at kindergarten. What kind of mental change occurred, I'm not sure, but it seems Mark has understood Scarlett's words in his own way. When going to meet the in-laws, as usual, we got on the bus and sat down. Some high school girls who seemed to have finished school early were talking about Mark, covering their mouths but their eyes laughing.
What's that? White hair.
I was considering changing seats, but then I noticed Mark had also seen the girls and was staring back at them.
Mark?
When I called out to him, Mark, still looking at the high school girls, smiled back at them. Surprised, perhaps, the girls moved away, flustered. There were other times when we were talked about or stared at, but Mark began to smile back each time. The speakers would feel guilty, stopping their gossip and diverting their attention to their phones. It seems to be Mark's own way of handling situations, though I wondered where he learned such diplomacy. But upon reflection, Scarlett had encouraged him that day.
Don't cry, just smile.
Those words must have resonated with Mark. It's not that there are no more people who mock or stare or demean based on appearance. In fact, we'll likely encounter more such people. Seeing Mark not just protected by me, his mom, but protecting himself, made me feel incredibly proud of his growth. Our child is striving to live with strength. Maybe it's thanks to Scarlett. I often think, if only there were more kind-hearted children like Scarlett. Discussing this with friends, I found support among other moms, leading to small educational gatherings in public spaces. If both those directly involved and those around them can understand each other, surely we can connect kind-hearted people and create a slightly kinder world than today. I hope for a world where more people, like Scarlett, understand and treat those with disabilities without discrimination, making it a better place for Mark to live positively. Seeing my granddaughter Mary not touching her hamburger, the server approached us with a stern tone.
You need to eat what you've ordered, or it'll be a problem.
Would you normally say that to a customer? Arguing seemed futile, so I responded humbly.
I'm sorry. I think she's just waiting for mine to arrive.
After my apologetic reply, the server walked away, looking dissatisfied. What a rude attitude. Trying to lighten the mood, I turned to Mary.
Let's eat, shall we?
But Mary remained downcast.
What's wrong?
Something seemed off. Then, the same server came back to our table, carrying something.
Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal.
She slammed the toy onto the table. Looking up at the server, I saw her smirking at Mary. It was a chilling sight. Mary must have felt something was wrong too.
I don't want this.
She threw the toy on the table to the floor. She's never usually so rough. Now. We shouldn't throw things. As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
Grandma, let's get out of here.
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. Looking at the discarded toy, I noticed a piece of paper with something written on it.
Grandma! No!
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and felt a chill. It was a Saturday. I was on my way to my son Jim's house. It was a warm day, hinting that spring was near. Then, Mom, thanks for today as well. As soon as I arrived, Jim and his wife Kate left the house together for their once or twice a month Saturday work.
Grandma, what's for lunch today?
After seeing her parents off, Mary came to me with a lovely smile. How about we go out to eat today? Mary was delighted with my suggestion. My name is Ellie. I am 63 years old this year. When my son and his wife are busy, I come to look after Mary like this. Having lost my husband early and spent a lot of time alone, the time spent with my granddaughter was nothing short of happiness for me. My son Jim has always tried hard not to be a burden on me. Even though there's no need for him to worry about me, he's been working ever since he graduated from high school. Thinking back, his first job was terrible. It was then I truly understood what a black company was, even as a parent. He would leave for work early in the morning and return home around the time the date changed. You could visibly see him getting thinner, even though he was quite well built, as he continued with that lifestyle. Seeing my son Jim become increasingly distressed, I somehow managed to convince him, and finally, he decided to quit that job. It had been 3 years since he started working there. Though there seemed to be some issues with the company upon leaving, I felt relieved once he was free from that place.
I'm going to be unemployed for a while.
Jim said this with a look of regret, but seeing my child physically and mentally deteriorating was much harder for me. When I told him that,
I'll take my time to think and decide on the next place,
he smiled, seemingly reassured. Being a hard worker, he continued his job search while studying for a qualification in a field he was interested in, and finally, he found a new job. I was worried because of the first experience, but the new workplace turned out to be surprisingly clean. He would come home on time, and there was no unpaid overtime. Jim seemed to have some peace of mind and was lively and enthusiastic about going to work every day. When he started to be recognized for his abilities and got on a career track,
"There's something important I want to talk about,"
he said suddenly with a serious look. I'm sensitive to these things. He must want to introduce a girlfriend.
"Something important?"
I feigned ignorance and asked.
"There's someone I want you to meet, Mom."
My intuition was right. Jim had dated a few women before. I wasn't explicitly told, but you can somehow tell. But this was the first time he wanted to introduce someone to me. So, that means?
"I'm free whenever, so let me know when you've decided on a day to bring her over,"
I said casually, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Later, the woman Jim brought over was polite and greeted properly. I've always taught Jim to greet properly since he was young. So, the first impression was perfect. I didn't intend to judge, but I couldn't help noticing her appearance and behavior.
"Nice to meet you, I'm Kate."
She seemed nervous, her small frame tense.
"Nice to meet you too, I'm Jim's mom."
Wondering if I'd been staring too much, I greeted her brightly to ease the tension.
"Jim, why don't you two sit in the living room and wait?"
While they waited in the living room, I prepared some coffee. Before bringing it over, they were whispering to each other but quieted down when they saw me. As I served the coffee, I heard them say thank you. But then, there was silence for a while. How do mothers around the world liven up moments like these? It's my first time, and I'm just puzzled. Huh? But it's everyone's first time in these situations, isn't it? Realizing something so obvious made me laugh unexpectedly. Jim and Kate looked at me, puzzled.
I'm sorry.
It's just that it's the first time Jim's brought a girlfriend over, so I'm a bit nervous.
I decided to just be myself from now on. After all, we're going to be a family for a long time.
I'm nervous too. But today, we have something we want to tell you, Mom.
Here it comes. This is the moment to listen seriously.
Mom, we're thinking of getting married.
I thought so.
We've already got the okay from Kate's parents, but...
Jim stops mid-sentence, looking surprised. Next to him, Kate also seems flustered. What are they both so flustered about?
Mom.
They peek at my face, worried. Wondering what was happening, I felt something cold spill onto my hand on my lap. It took me a moment to realize, but it seems tears were falling from my eyes.
I'm so sorry. Did I do something wrong?
It's the first meeting, and here the mother of the person they want to marry is suddenly crying. Kate's panicked reaction is now a funny story, but at that moment, she must have been really anxious.
Oh, why is this happening? I'm not even sure myself.
Saying that, I laughed through my tears. I had no intention of opposing Jim's marriage. In fact, I was happy that he had finally found someone to be happy with other than me. These tears must be of happiness. But I couldn't deny feeling like a part of my heart was being taken away. After excusing myself for a moment and coming back, they still looked worried. With a deliberately cheerful voice, I said, "Kate, I trust Jim. If he chose you, I know everything will be okay no matter what." Kate seemed to be waiting for what I would say next.
Promise me, both of you, to build a happy family together.
I could see Kate's expression brighten.
Thank you, Mom. All right, no more serious talk.
With that, I started asking about how they got to know each other and their journey to deciding on marriage. While Jim was seeing Kate out, I muttered to my husband's portrait. "Jim is getting married. Time flies, doesn't it?" It felt as if the portrait of my husband smiled back. Kate works at the same place as Jim, and she plans to continue working even after getting married. Jim wanted to live together, but I declined. I didn't want to intrude on the young couple, and I was looking forward to having time to myself. Neither wanting to be a burden nor to burden them. They decided on a new home within cycling distance from our house, and Jim moved out. Time flew by, and soon my granddaughter Mary was born. I was amazed at how adorable a creature a grandchild could be. As Kate's maternity leave was coming to an end, I checked with Jim. "Have you decided who will look after Mary?" I was hoping for a chance to take care of Mary. Not out of kindness or obligation, but because I wanted to be with her. However, Jim thought I was worried and gave me a disappointing reply.
"Mom, don't worry. Our company has a daycare."
Jim's new job really seemed to be a respectable white-collar company. I guess I won't be taking care of her. A few days later, Kate, who had been observing our conversation, brought me hope.
"Ellie, are you free this Saturday?"
She asked over the phone, and since I had no particular plans, I inquired about the matter.
"Actually, both Jim and I have sudden work on Saturday. And the daycare is closed on Saturdays."
I immediately responded. "Mary? You mean if I could take care of Mary?" I was leaning forward even though I was on the phone. "Could you?" I almost answered too eagerly, but kept my composure.
"Yes, that's fine."
My voice must have trembled with excitement. Kate sounded happy on the other end of the phone. Since then, I occasionally take care of Mary, which has continued to this day. As it approached noon, I took Mary out. As promised, we walked to the nearby family restaurant. I would prefer to eat at home, but after receiving suspicious calls and an unexpected pizza delivery while taking care of Mary at Jim's house, I felt uneasy. The family restaurant we were heading to was where I had worked part-time before, familiar and convenient for us. Upon arrival, the staff guided us to the usual spacious sofa seat. It was Saturday lunchtime, but it wasn't too crowded. "Mary, what would you like to eat today?" I handed her the menu while sitting next to her.
"I want the kids' menu."
Mary opened the menu to the kids' menu page.
"I'll have this."
She pointed to her usual choice, a hamburger. Mary really loves hamburgers, doesn't she? Seeing Mary's smiling face, I chose my own meal. Although spring was near, the days were still a bit chilly. I decided on the seasonal pot au feu. After placing our order via the touch panel, we went to the drink bar. Mary chose orange juice, and I filled a cup with coffee, then we returned to our seats. "Did Grandma know I like hamburgers?"
"Of course."
It was a casual conversation, but my face was smiling the whole time. "Right, Mary. Go to the bathroom before we eat." Mary often wants to go to the bathroom during meals, so I encouraged her to go ahead.
"Okay."
With a lively response, Mary headed to the bathroom. Her steps seemed lighter, perhaps excited for the hamburger. Her retreating figure was endearing to me. When Mary returned, the hamburger was served. But she didn't start eating. Maybe she was waiting for my meal to arrive. "Mary, you can start eating," I encouraged, but Mary looked at me puzzled. That's when the server brought my pot au feu. Noticing Mary hadn't touched her burger, the server spoke in a stern tone. "You need to eat what you've ordered." Would you normally say that to a customer? Surprised, I thought about the food waste issue and wondered if staff were instructed to say this. Arguing seemed pointless, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. She's just waiting for mine. We'll make sure it's eaten." The server left with a look of dissatisfaction. She was strikingly beautiful but had such a poor attitude. Shaking off my astonishment, I encouraged Mary. "Let's eat." However, Mary remained downcast and didn't touch her hamburger. "What's wrong, Mary?" Something seemed off. Then the same server approached with something in hand. "Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal," she said bluntly, placing the toy on the table. Something was wrong. I boldly looked at the server, who was smirking at Mary. It wasn't a kind smile, but something creepy, as if plotting. Feeling a chill, Mary must have sensed something too.
"I don't want this."
She threw the toy on the floor. Something she'd never normally do. Under different circumstances, I would scold her, but this was different. Aware of other customers, I tried to calm her. Now. We shouldn't throw things." As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly,
"Grandma, let's get out of here."
Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted, "What are you talking about?" I noticed something had come out of the discarded toy. Like a piece of paper.
"Grandma, no."
Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and was horrified. It was covered in what looked like a spell. "What is this?" I remembered the suspicious calls at Jim's house, with a voice chanting a spell as soon as I answered. Could there be a connection? Noticing something was wrong, the manager came out from the back. "Is there something wrong?" he asked, offering a hand as I crouched. He seemed to notice the paper in my hand.
"What is this?"
The manager looked disgusted. Standing up, I explained the situation. The unpleasant server just glared at Mary, silent.
"I'm very sorry."
The manager apologized, but the woman wouldn't take her eyes off Mary. I feared for Mary's safety and hugged her close, addressing the woman. "Even though the manager has apologized, don't you have anything to say?" I had tried not to upset her, but it seems I reached my limit too. My tone became a bit harsh. Perhaps triggered by my tone, the woman suddenly shouted,
"If it weren't for this brat."
She lunged at Mary. Instinctively, I shielded Mary, and the woman scratched me, yelling,
"Move! Let go!"
The manager tried to stop her, but he couldn't restrain her alone. Hearing the commotion, several male staff members subdued her, and someone had called the police. Mary started crying out of fear. "I'm sorry, Mary," I said, holding my scratched area and comforting her trembling body. Before the situation escalated further, Mary and I were taken to the restaurant's office. The woman was there too. "Emma, why did you do that?" The manager asked her, but she remained silent. "I'm really sorry." The store manager apologized to us again. As I was pondering over the situation, the police arrived. "Emma, 33 years old." I overheard her name during the separate questioning. I told the police about Emma's aggressive behavior towards Mary for not eating her hamburger and about the suspicious paper in the toy. Then, Mary, who had been listening. "Grandma, it's not that." She tugged at my sleeve. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she seemed hesitant. "Mary, Can you tell me that story? A young police officer gently encouraged her.
I saw it. When I was going to the bathroom, that woman put shrimp in the hamburger.
Mary hesitantly testified. It was a fact I hadn't known.
So that's why you didn't eat it?
It sounded like Emma clicked her tongue. The young officer seemed to realize.
This child has a shellfish allergy.
He finally understood and asked the manager to check if the hamburger was still available.
Too bad, it must have been disposed of by now.
Emma spoke up for the first time after the two had left the office, crossing her arms and legs with a disdainful look.
Could you answer our questions as well?
The officer sighed in disbelief at her questioning.
That's what I've been saying. I have nothing to tell. I'll keep silent.
Emma fell silent again, idly playing with her loosely permed hair, looking bored. Her demeanor changed drastically when the manager and the young police officer returned to the office. In the officer's hand was a plate with a cold hamburger. Emma looked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Under the police officer's supervision, the manager cut the hamburger open. Inside wasn't just shrimp, but also crab meat used in crab cream croquettes.
Does this restaurant's hamburgers normally contain shrimp and crab meat?
The officer asked. Probably for confirmation.
No, they do not.
The manager seemed disappointed. Then, everyone in the room turned their gaze towards Emma. She kept her head down and didn't move, but then she started to shake her shoulders.
Emma.
When the manager spoke to her, a small voice leaked out. I thought she might be crying. But it turned out she was trying to suppress laughter. Lifting her face, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing loudly.
I got caught.
Her voice was buoyant, like someone caught in a mischievous act, clearly enjoying herself.
I'll tell you everything. But I want that handsome guy over there, not you.
She pointed at the young police officer after hearing our conversation.
Behave yourself.
The officer who had been questioning Emma scolded her.
Oh, don't look so scary.
Emma winked, but it seemed ineffective on the experienced officer. What a woman. I could only stare in disbelief at the scene. The details Emma bragged about were beyond normal comprehension for me. She claimed to be Jim's ex-girlfriend, a co-worker from his previous black company. Jim was treated as incompetent there, so Emma had broken up with him. However, upon hearing rumors of Jim's success at his new job, she attempted to reconnect. But Jim. Emma showed no remorse for her actions.
I even graciously offered to get back together, and he rejected me.
She complained. Understandably so. Jim was already married to Kate, and they had Mary.
I thought if I could just deal with a child, he'd choose me over that plain woman.
She spoke as if expecting understanding, but surely no one empathized. Emma had been monitoring Jim and Mary, engaging in harassment whenever she disapproved of something. The delivery orders I didn't recognize and the suspicious calls were her doing. When I started bringing Mary to this family restaurant, Emma also started working here, learning Mary's preferences and allergies. I was horrified. I even regretted inadvertently revealing Mary's allergy myself. I embraced Mary as she leaned against me. I thought I finally had my chance today. After confessing everything, Emma sighed with disappointment. When her story ended, the police officer took her away from the office. As she left, she glared at Mary and laughed creepily, which made me tighten my embrace. After apologizing to the restaurant staff for the inconvenience and thanking the person who saved the hamburger from being disposed of, Mary and I went back to Jim's house. We waited for Kate and Jim to come home and then told them about the day's events.
That woman, she did what?
Jim clenched his fist, trembling with anger, but Kate gently enveloped his hand.
I had heard about her, but what a terrible woman.
Kate knew of her from Jim's stories. If only I had rejected her more firmly. No, it's not your fault. I should have been more careful, too. Leaving everything to Ellie and even making her scared. Both Jim and Kate blamed themselves. I felt the same. Had I adequately protected Mary while she was in my care? In the heavy silence, Kate finally spoke. At least Mary is safe. That's all that matters. To ensure such an incident wouldn't repeat, we discussed and decided that Jim's family would move. Emma was sentenced to a severe prison term for attempting to harm a child. Unsatisfied with the verdict, she became frenzied and violent in court, looking possessed. Watching her from the gallery, Kate and I decided to remodel our home to protect Mary from that demon again. Emma continued to chant spells in prison, deemed insane, and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric ward. I was certain she wouldn't leave there. Watching her frenzied state confirmed my belief. But still, we needed reassurance. Jim's family moved into a home equipped with security cameras, alarms, and immediate security response. Kate switched to part-time work for more flexibility and spent more time with Mary. We were determined never to let Mary be scared again. We likely still share that sentiment. Grandma, why do you look scared? 5 years later, Mary, soon to be a 5th grader, peered into my face. Oh? Did I look scared? I diverted the topic.
Let's get ready. Aren't we going out to eat?
And also called out to Kate and Mary's sister, Lucy. It was Saturday. Basking in the warm spring sunshine, we started walking. Mary held Lucy's hand as they walked ahead, while Kate and I followed, watching their backs. Our son is going to live with you, Mom. Even if he's sick, being with your grandchild every day is a blessing, right? The voice of my son on the phone dripped with malice, as if mocking me. I hugged my grandson tightly, covering his ears so he wouldn't hear that voice. My grandson, who just turned 7, was recently taken to the hospital. There, he was diagnosed with a certain illness, and my son and his wife left him at my house. Coming home from work, I found my grandson sitting dejectedly at the entrance. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. He told me himself, I was abandoned by Mom and Dad because I'm sick. I wish they could understand how I felt. I immediately called my son. What followed was a brazen declaration of abandonment. My daughter-in-law, likely beside my son, let out a vulgar laugh, saying, We don't want to catch his illness. Let the short-lived elderly take care of him. She hurled insults worse than my son's and cut off the call with a harsh laugh. The phone, abruptly disconnected, never connected again. Looking at my trembling grandson in my arms, I made up my mind. I will raise him. First of all, my name is Frida. I'm 57 and a company employee. I married my husband at 22 and gave birth to our son, Morty, the following year. My husband adored Morty, and the 3 of us lived happily together.
He's so adorable. I'm so happy such a cute child was born to us.
My husband would say, holding Morty and beaming with joy. But that happiness didn't last long. When Morty was 2, my husband suddenly fell ill and passed away. I was heartbroken, but I had no time to grieve. I had to raise Morty alone. From then on, I worked tirelessly, raising Morty as a single mother. I never remarried. Luckily, I had been a full-time employee since before marriage, so I managed to raise Morty without financial struggles. Now Morty is 34. He works as a company employee in a general business, but Morty has always been somewhat flighty and easily influenced. He got his current job because a college senior suggested it, and he just went along with it. When Morty was 26, he married a woman his age named Maya. Maya was very strong-willed, and I never had a good impression of her even during their dating days. For instance, Maya would frequently visit our house but never once said hello or goodbye. I gently brought this up to Maya at one point. Maya, it's great you come to visit, but I'd appreciate it if you'd say hello when you arrive. Maya reacted defiantly, visibly annoyed. What? You don't have the right to tell me what to do. I'm a guest here. I'm doing you a favor by visiting. It's really unpleasant to be told such arbitrary things. I was stunned by her brash response. Morty, on his part, would say things like, Mom, don't be so stiff. I thought it was common sense to greet when visiting someone's home, but it seemed not to apply to Maya. Morty appeared completely under the thumb of the assertive Maya. After Maya left, I reiterated my point to Morty, but just let it go. He just brushed it off. Incidents like these often happened, so I didn't have a good impression of Maya. Of course, I repeatedly told Morty to be more responsible. The couple rented an apartment after their marriage and started living near our house. The following year, they had their first son, Darren. My first grandchild. Children grow up so fast, and in no time, Darren turned 7. One day, as I was returning from work and my house came into view, I noticed someone sitting at the entrance. Who could that be? As I got closer, I realized it was Darren. Having been busy with work recently and not seeing my son's family or Darren, I was both surprised and overjoyed to see him after so long.
Darren! It's been a while. What are you doing here?
When I called out to him, Darren slowly lifted his face to meet my eyes. Grandma. Seeing Darren's face after such a long time, I was lost for words. His face had white, patchy areas, and his eyes were swollen red as if he had been crying. I tried to remain as calm as possible and invited Darren inside. And? Darren, what happened? Can you tell Grandma about it? I gently asked him. He nodded slowly and began to speak in bits and pieces. Well, I got a skin disease. I forgot its name because it was complicated, but it's a rare disease. Seeing young Darren's lips quiver and his face turn pale, my heart ached. A rare disease. Is that really what you were told? Yes, Mom and Dad said that. Ever since I got this disease, they stopped looking at my face. And today, they brought me here to Grandma's house and told me to wait for you, and then they went away. Shocked by Darren's story, I hurriedly called Morty. To prevent Darren from hearing the conversation, I asked him to stay in the living room and drink juice while I moved to another room.
Morty! I heard from Darren. How could you leave him at our doorstep without telling me anything?
Mom, you're back. Yeah, Darren has this rare disease called pityriasis simplex. It's really troublesome. Pityriasis simplex. I remembered hearing that name before. I had seen a feature on it on TV once. Wasn't it just white spots? White spots are common in children and not a rare disease. Is it really a rare disease? The dermatologist said it's pityriasis simplex. It's a complicated name, so it must be rare, right? So, since we could catch it too, Maya suggested you should raise him, and I agreed. So, Mom, please take care of Darren for us.
Thanks. What? You call yourselves parents? That's so irresponsible.
I shouted in anger at Morty's outrageous statement. Then Maya took over the call, and her shrill voice echoed.
Morty and I are still young and have our lives ahead of us. It would be terrible to catch such a creepy skin disease. So let the short-lived elderly take care of him. Bye.
With that unilateral shout, the call was disconnected. Stunned, I quickly took out a book from the bookshelf that listed various diseases and their treatments and looked up pityriasis simplex. Thank goodness. It's just white spots. He'll be fine. The research confirmed that pityriasis simplex was not a rare disease and, with proper treatment, could be cured in most cases. I felt relieved and simultaneously furious at my selfish son and daughter-in-law. I realized they had abandoned Darren at our house, assuming it was a rare disease from its complicated name. How selfish of them. I will definitely raise Darren well. I muttered with determination and returned to the living room. I smiled at Darren, who looked anxious. Darren, don't worry. Your illness is curable. Let's go to the hospital together tomorrow.
Really?
Darren, thinking it was incurable, lit up. Yes, it's not a rare disease, so don't worry. And Darren, from today, you'll live with Grandma. It's okay. I'll make sure you're happy. Let's live together happily. Darren looked a bit bewildered, but then nodded. Thank you, Grandma. And smiled. Time passed, and 9 years went by. I turned 66, and Darren became 16. During these 9 years, I couldn't make any contact with my son and his wife. Darren, in his teenage years, didn't talk much lately but grew up kind, occasionally cooking meals. Now retired, I support Darren with my pension and retirement funds. Then one day, my son and his wife, who disappeared 9 years ago, suddenly appeared at our home. What do you want now, after all this time? I coldly confronted them at the entrance. How dare they show their faces after not contacting us for 9 years? Hey, we saw you on TV the other day. Surprised us. Darren is amazing. Earning so much money at his age, huh? Apparently, they had seen a recent TV interview, Teenage Genius Inventor. Maya, standing next to Morty, also chimed in with a sneer. Getting a patent and all, that's really amazing. You must be so rich now, huh? Indeed, Darren was skilled at inventing, and he had recently obtained a patent. It was clear from their attitude that Morty and Maya believed Darren was making money from his patent and had come here today with that in mind. They hadn't expressed any concern for Darren, they only talked about him becoming rich. They're still the worst couple. Then Darren appeared behind me. He must have heard our conversation. Hey Darren. We've come to take you back. A son is a son, even if he suffers from an illness. Let's live together again with your dad and mom. Morty's exaggerated behavior was almost laughable. To this, Darren responded coldly. Huh? Who the heck are you? Darren, now a high school student, was old enough to understand the situation. He realized from the conversation that his parents were after money, and felt no attachment to them, having been abandoned. Morty and Maya seemed taken aback by Darren's indifferent attitude, but quickly regained composure and started talking fluently. Darren is sick, so his life will be tough. That's why Maya and I will support him. Morty declared. What? After you abandoned me, you have the nerve to act all fatherly now? Don't pretend to be a dad. Darren, having listened to them for a while, clicked his tongue in disgust and scoffed. I was also astonished that they still mistakenly thought Darren had a rare disease. Darren's face had completely healed. Morty, Maya, you've been mistaken all along. Darren doesn't have a rare disease. Pityriasis simplex is just white spots, common in children. Darren completely recovered in about a year. Stunned by my explanation, Morty suddenly changed his attitude and shouted. We've been tricked. Screw you. Why didn't you tell us something so important? Maya followed suit. We were kidnapped by an old woman. You've taken our child for 9 years. Give back our child, Frida, you old kidnapper. And cursed at me. Ignoring their rants, Darren quickly took out his mobile phone and called the police. The police are on their way. And just so you know, getting a patent doesn't mean you become rich instantly. You need companies to use the technology, and only then do you get patent fees. It's not some epic-making discovery, nor is it a widely used patent, so it's just a dream to be filthy rich. The money I've received so far has all gone to materials. So, I don't have any money. After Darren explained calmly, Morty and Maya turned red with anger, screaming. What the hell? Then why did you call us here? Seeing their reaction, Darren sighed. I don't know. You came here on your own, so don't get angry at us. Just go home. Seeing Darren laugh, Morty shouted. Don't you get smart with me. His fist was clenched, ready to lash out at Darren, so I instinctively jumped forward to intervene. Just as Morty was about to swing at me, a loud male voice rang out.
Stop it!
A police officer was outside the window. He had seen Morty about to hit Darren through the curtain and acted quickly. While his shout startled Morty, another officer quietly entered from the entrance, stepping between us and Morty. Morty waved his open hand, feigning innocence. He then sneered at Darren.
You might be an inventor or whatever, but don't get cocky. Live with that old woman for the rest of your life.
With that parting shot, he left. The police asked if we were okay, and we said yes. After explaining the situation, we were advised not to let my son and his wife into our home again, and I nodded in agreement. The police reassured us they would help if needed, leaving me relieved. After the police left, I asked Darren,
Are you okay?
Concerned about his mental state. I knew he must be hurt, even if he acted tough, after being treated that way by his biological parents. However, Darren admitted,
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shocked. I knew my parents were the worst for abandoning me without understanding my illness. But I didn't expect them to be that stupid, thinking I'm rich just because of a patent. All those nice words, thinking I'd agree to live with them.
He sighed deeply, clearly displeased, and ruffled his hair. Then he looked down at me, smiling.
But Grandma, why did you try to protect me when I was about to get hit? I'm 16 now, and I'm bigger than you. I don't need protection.
He asked me as if he was dumbfounded, which left me dumbfounded.
What are you talking about? No matter how old they get, you want to protect your kids. Their size doesn't matter.
Darren groaned softly, then turned away.
I'd hate it more if you got hurt,
he said gruffly, heading to his room. It seemed he was worried about me. I felt happy, realizing how kind Darren had grown. After that, I quickly contacted a certain person. A few days later, I went to the house where my son and his wife currently lived, accompanied by a certain person. When I rang the doorbell, Morty opened the door lazily and was shocked to see me and the person beside me.
Lean! Why?
The person next to me was Lean, Morty's friend. Morty's voice startled Maya, who also came from the back.
Lean!
Her face turning pale. Ignoring me, the couple was visibly shaken by Lean's arrival.
Long time no see, Morty, Maya.
Lean greeted them, and Morty, looking agitated.
How did you find this place?
He asked. I answered his question.
When you came to our house the other day, you mentioned to Darren that you now live in a single-family home in this town.
I didn't miss that.
But how did you find this specific house with just the town's name? We didn't give you any detailed address.
Morty exclaimed in panic.
That's true, knowing just the town's name wouldn't be enough to find your address, so I hired a detective to focus on this town.
A detective?
Yes, and it didn't take long for them to find you. Then, I contacted Lean and we decided to come see you together today.
Using a detective is cheating. That's no different from stalking.
Lean glared at Morty.
I've got nothing to say to fraudsters. Anyway, Morty, Maya, return the money I lent you.
Lean's stern voice filled the room, causing the couple to tremble. Lean, a friend of Morty's, had lent them money. I only found out about this after my son and his wife had disappeared for some time. Lean came to my house to consult about lending them money and not being able to contact them anymore. He came all the way to visit me, wondering if they might have returned to a parent's house due to financial struggles so bad that they had to run away to avoid paying him back, and asked me to let him know if I ever found out their whereabouts.
You two told Lean that Darren had a rare disease and you were in a tight spot financially, and got $5,000 from him by playing on his sympathy.
My words made my son and his wife look down, trembling.
It wasn't just Lean, you did the same thing with others, borrowing money here and there. Then, when repayment became difficult, you abandoned Darren at our house and disappeared without paying back anyone, exploiting people's kindness for your own gain. You're the lowest of the low. No. But we really thought Darren had a rare disease. Yes, we really did. That's why we borrowed the money.
Frustrated with their excuses, I shouted.
What are you talking about? Even if you thought so, you never treated Darren's condition. You took him to a dermatologist once and then neglected him, not spending a dime on his treatment. So where's the money you borrowed from your friends? Do you have it with you if you didn't use it for treatment costs? Of course, you don't. You probably squandered it on yourselves. As parents and human beings, you're the absolute worst. Shame on you. Ugh.
They fell silent.
The real reason you left Darren at my house wasn't because you were afraid of his disease spreading, it was to evade the debts you owed. Months before abandoning Darren, you frequently went on trips and started wearing only branded items, didn't you?
No, but it's true that we didn't want to be around Darren because his disease was creepy.
Even at this point, they still tried to justify. And with despicable excuses, too. Sighing deeply.
Darren is fortunate not to have grown up with parents like you. He might have ended up with a twisted personality because of you. I'm so glad he has grown into a kind and admirable young man.
I said. My son and his wife made sullen faces, not seeming convinced. Lean said sternly to the two.
I have a good idea who else you've defrauded, so I'm planning to contact them and start a class action lawsuit. You better be prepared.
A lawsuit? Wait a minute. Isn't that a bit too drastic?
Too drastic? Not at all. Unless you can repay right now all the money you borrowed from me and others, which I guess you've already spent, right?
Lean pressed. My son and his wife were speechless.
I never imagined being betrayed by a longtime friend like you, Morty. I became distrustful of people for a while after you two disappeared. I will never forgive you.
Lean said, glaring at them with hatred. I told my son and his wife.
Don't worry about Darren. He's a high school student now, capable of making his own decisions. Please don't contact him anymore.
I was firm in cutting ties with them. Months later, despite being threatened, Morty and his wife still hadn't repaid the money. They were sued in a class action by the people they owed. Though each person was owed less than $10,000, the total was overwhelming for them. They ended up selling the house they had bought just a few years prior. But because they had a mortgage, most of the proceeds went to paying that off, and the little that was left went towards the lawsuit settlement. Even though it was their most valuable asset, I couldn't believe they had to sell their house. It turned out they sold the house intending to move back into mine. I learned this sometime after the lawsuit, when I got a phone call from an enraged Morty.
Mom! What the hell? Our house is gone. What's going on?
What do you mean? As the for sale sign says, I sold the house and land. It's quite obvious, isn't it?
Indeed, I had decided to sell the house and land even before they faced the lawsuit. Real estate agents said that vacant houses are hard to sell, and that it was better to demolish and sell the land. Following their advice, I demolished the house and quickly sold the land due to its good location. The money went towards moving with Darren. Actually, Darren was attending a high school quite far away, and commuting from the old house was quite the journey. So we moved closer to his school for a shorter commute. When I explained this, Morty started shouting.
What? Where are you living now? We have nowhere to live since we sold our house. Tell me your address, we'll live with you.
There's no way I'll tell you. One reason I sold the house and land was to cut ties with you. I won't tell you where we live, and I'm blocking your number, so don't contact us ever again.
No. No way. That's too harsh.
Morty was stunned, and behind him, Maya's despairing scream could be heard.
The ones who are truly terrible are you too. You don't seem to be remorseful at all, but you should reflect on your actions and attitudes. The last thing I can say to you as a parent is to learn to introspect and repent. Goodbye,
I said and ended the call, setting it to block further communication. My disillusioned son and his wife managed to find an old apartment to live in, but they seemed to be leading a tough life. Afterwards, I consulted with the lawyer hired by Lean and reconsidered my relationship with Darren. Until now, I had raised him as a grandmother. But Morty and his wife's presence was negatively influencing Darren. So, I considered legally becoming his parent through adoption. If it were recognized, I wouldn't have to divide my estate equally between Darren and Morty when I pass away. It would prevent Morty from running off with everything. I decided to check with Darren.
Darren, I want to adopt you. Not just as a grandmother and grandson, but legally as mother and son. What do you think? I respect your feelings, of course.
After a moment of silence.
Yeah, I want to be your son officially.
Darren smiled shyly and said. With Darren's consent, I contacted the family court with the help of a lawyer. Given Morty's terrible behavior, the adoption was relatively easily approved. Likely influenced by Darren being 16 years old. Darren and I successfully completed the adoption process. It was a joyous moment for me, especially knowing that he chose me over his biological parents even when he is still in his adolescence. Darren, talented in inventing, is always trying new things, and I'm living a peaceful life, enjoying watching him grow. My husband has a curious name, Wyatt. I had no way of knowing that my mother-in-law's fierce wishes were contained therein when I met him. I'm Ashley. Currently 44. This story dates back to when I was 32 and discovered the origin of Wyatt's name. We met in college. We're the same age. He went on to graduate school, but I got a job. Then, at 27, we felt it was time to settle down, so we got married. He was serious and very reserved. He's so earnest that instead of saying I like you or I like you a lot, he straightforwardly says I love you. That's one of the things I loved about him. However, he had one worry. When we went to his family home for a family meeting, his mother, Madison, told us,
"We won't accept marriage unless we live together."
Oh no.
But we were having such quality time together.
When I said this depressedly, he said,
Then how about a runaway marriage?
Wyatt made this astonishing proposal. He's so serious, he might just do it. No, Having been loved by my parents all my life, the thought of being estranged from them due to marriage troubled me.
Well, I'll continue working, so I'll be out mostly. It should be fine.
I agreed.
Are you sure? I've already received the entire inheritance, so even a runaway marriage would be fine.
He said, with a straight face. His father had apparently passed away from illness when he was in high school. No, yeah, it's fine, I understand, for now at least. And so, with our marriage, living with my MIL began. Right with the cohabitation, the troubles started. Harassment towards me from day one. Isn't this supposed to start later on? We had a wedding reception at noon. We had moved our belongings the day before and started living in Wyatt's family home that day, but first, "Make dinner, please," was how it started. It's already past 6 p.m., and I'm tired from the wedding reception, but it's MIL's order, and I didn't want to start trouble on the first day. So, I'll make something from what's in the fridge, I said.
There's nothing in it.
She showed me the empty fridge.
Start with the shopping,
she said.
And don't talk to me every now and then. You're the last person to come into this house, which means you're the lowest here. I don't want someone at the bottom to talk to me casually. Also, find the cooking utensils and seasonings yourself, and manage somehow.
So, without even being told where the nearest supermarket was, I ended up having to whip up dinner from scratch. I managed to locate the nearest supermarket using car navigation, but searching for spices and pots took a while. Finally, dinner was ready.
Done.
I called out only for Madison. But she called Wyatt, who was upstairs, and said,
"A delicious meal is ready. Ashley's tired, so I made it. Hey, wait."
From the first day, this marked the beginning of a thorny path. Madison's harassment continued daily. Even after returning from work, cooking was my duty. Laundry, of course, was too. And she'd claim to Wyatt that she did it all.
Her constant remark was, "You're not even family to me. You come from another home, so you don't know the rules here. Look, even the way you fold this towel is wrong," she said. "Could you teach me how to fold it, then?"
When I humbly asked,
"Why should I teach someone who's not family, someone from another home?"
she'd retort. Hearing our loud exchange,
"What's going on?"
Wyatt would come down from upstairs to the washroom.
I started to say, "Madison was complaining about the way I fold towels."
But,
"Wally, listen! She's complaining about the way we fold our towels."
hanging onto Wyatt's arm, she raised a cry that sounded almost like sobbing.
Reflexively, I was surprised and let out a strange sound like what?
Such hollowness and blatant lies. Enough, this person isn't worth talking about, I'll ask Wyatt directly. I thought, shaking with anger.
"Just show me how to fold the towel."
My voice laced with irritation.
"Well, if you pick it up from the folded edge, it unfolds, so I think the folded part should face this way." I never really paid attention.
He demonstrated how he folded the towel and placed it.
"Make sure you follow that,"
Madison shouted.
"But I think you should fold it however you like." "That's what I think,"
Wyatt said, then added.
"Let's not shout about something like this."
With that, he left. Then,
"You just tried to snitch. You're not even a family member."
she confronted me with a fierce look. Snitch. I hadn't heard that word since middle school. And honestly, this kind of bullying, no offense, felt like something a middle schooler would do. I held back my anger. Madison's unfairness was clear, so naturally, I told Wyatt about it.
"Got it. I'll talk to Mom,"
he said while folding the newspaper he was reading.
I said, "But then, she'll just say I'm snitching again." Feeling down.
Seeing this, he replied,
"No, but I've realized that Mom has been a bit too harsh on you."
And just held me in his arms. One day, amidst Madison's relentless harassment, an incident occurred. A call came from the neighborhood supermarket.
"Your mother tried to leave the store without paying for the items."
Is that Madison a shoplifter? I was at work, but our home phone was set to forward calls to my mobile, so I was immediately aware of the incident. Of course, Wyatt was at work too. I left work early to pick her up. There in the supermarket manager's office sat the manager and Madison.
"Madison, what have you done?"
It was such a shock that I burst through the door and confronted her directly. She snapped back.
"You're not family, go away."
She kicked a chair in front of her and turned her face away, spitting the words out.
"What?"
It was her usual line, but I was speechless that she'd use it even in such a situation. I was frozen in place.
"It's all recorded on the security camera,"
the manager then said. I realized then that I hadn't apologized to the manager. It's not like people practice how to react when a family member is caught shoplifting, so I hope he'd forgive the oversight. Apologizing was the priority.
"I'm very sorry for this,"
I said. Madison, upon seeing this,
"An apology from someone who's not family doesn't mean anything to me,"
she scoffed. This wasn't solving anything. And her attitude. Both the manager and I were stunned into silence. She kept sulking and turning her face away. 2 hours later, Wyatt arrived. Then,
"Wally. It's finally happened, because of this DIL. She's been bullying me, and the stress."
Madison suddenly burst into tears. The manager and I were speechless at her sudden change in behavior. After 2 hours of silence, this was her reaction.
"I'm very sorry. We will pay double the cost of the items,"
Wyatt said, bowing his head.
"Shoplifting. This is unbelievable. And for 2 hours until you came, I was just being ignored." "Actually,"
Wyatt stroked my back soothingly,
"this isn't her first time." "What?" shoplifting is like a habit for her. It's happened before. And you didn't try to do something about it? Surely, as a family. Dad used to handle it before he fell ill. It stopped after he passed away, but it started again when you came.
I couldn't quite understand the logic behind it. I didn't understand, but
I can't stay silent anymore because she's accused me of you're not part of my family, go home, and you are bullying me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to fight back.
He just kept silently stroking my back. 2 months later, another supermarket called about Madison shoplifted.
Here we go.
Thumbs up for a family member's crime is inappropriate, but I was actually waiting for this. Holding a certain document, I stood up from my desk at work. The supermarket where she was caught was quite far from our house. Ascending the stairs to the waiting room where she was.
How did you even get to this store from so far away?
I heard the manager's loud voice from the door. The previous manager was slim, but this one seemed stout just from his voice. As I opened the door, indeed, there stood a large, burly man. But her response was unexpected. By taxi.
Taxi. You took a taxi all this way just to shoplift.
The manager's voice, fitting his size, boomed again.
I bet you've been banned from all the supermarkets in the neighborhood, haven't you?
It was my turn to enter. This being the second time, I first apologized to the manager. Then turned to confront Madison.
Madison, I do the shopping, don't I? You don't need to buy anything, so why go out to shoplift?
As expected, Madison spat out her usual line.
You're not family, go away.
Here it comes. I've been waiting for this line. I decided to confront her with every single fact.
Then I'll leave. And by the way, Wyatt won't come to pick you up either. At that, Madison exclaimed, "What?" surprised by the unexpected answer. I mean,
I slammed the paper I had on the desk in front of her.
You're not Wyatt's family, are you? What?
Even the manager, with his large build, was taken aback.
Do you understand this?
I smile and say to the manager next to me. Her shoulders started to tremble.
Since I was constantly being told you're not family, I thought I'd retort with I am a family member, look here, next time. So I fetched our vital records, and to my surprise, it turns out you're not the family member here.
Her shoulders trembled more violently.
Wyatt knows all about why it's come to this. He's on his way here today. He's coming, but he won't be picking you up anymore. What?
Her face began to turn pale. Beside her.
What does that mean?
The manager interjected. Being a stranger and moreover dealing with a shoplifter, he probably didn't want to get involved, but even as an outsider, this not a family member though a mother was too intriguing to ignore.
Well, you'll understand when Wyatt arrives,
I declared confidently. On the evening I fetched the vital records and learned the truth, I asked Wyatt what it all meant.
My birth mother was.
That's when he revealed the truth to me.
She passed away when I was in elementary school.
The vital records corroborated this. And the name of Wyatt's deceased mother wasn't Madison, the woman living with us now.
Why didn't you tell me?
I had to ask, genuinely puzzled.
I told you I inherited everything, right? I said that when we were talking about possibly having a runaway marriage, and I thought I had explained it then. Your words were far from enough.
Typical of the reticent Wyatt.
However,
what he shared next was quite surprising. That too was about to be laid out before our eyes. As before, Wyatt arrived 2 hours late. I'm terribly sorry for this. He first apologized to the manager. Wally. In front of the vital records, Madison started to tremble. It's not true, you see.
It is true, isn't it?
She gasped and flinched.
You know what I'm talking about.
Wyatt let out a sigh. Then he began to explain again, intending Madison to hear as well. The most pitiful was the manager, forced to listen to the burdensome family issues of others after dealing with shoplifting, but he sat quietly and listened. The content was nightmarish, but no doubt intriguing.
My birth mother passed away when I was in elementary school. As you can see from the house, we were wealthy, and we had a live-in housekeeper. That's her.
She was the housekeeper. Her true identity revealed.
She harassed my mom quite a bit. Perhaps she thought a child wouldn't understand, but I grew up witnessing it all. She constantly bullied Mom with "you're not family" and "you don't know the rules of this house because you come from another home," yet she never taught the rules. Mom was tormented by this until her death. From the first day of marriage, she was bullied relentlessly. When I was born, desperate for hope, she named me Wyatt, wishing me to be strong and brave.
Wait a minute.
Madison interrupted.
I took care of you since you were in your first year of high school because Albert, before he passed, told me to look after Wyatt. I've been caring for you dearly ever since.
Dad indeed mentioned she will be like a mother from now on before he passed. He also said my inheritance was partly as a caretaker's fee for you. The rest became mine. That's why I've been calling you Mom. But Dad knew you were bullying my real mom. I directly heard and saw him reprimanding you several times. Each time, you cried and claimed Mom was lying and belittling you. When Mom passed, Dad, already frail, regretted relying on you for the mansion and me. Before he died, he told me, "Avenge Samantha."
Wyatt spoke calmly. To which,
"That's not true. That's not."
Madison cried out.
"I raised you like a natural child."
He responded.
Like a natural child.
He laughed. Wyatt, usually so reserved and not very expressive. It was the first time I saw him laugh in such a cold manner.
While Mom was alive, you claimed her cooking as your own. After she passed, you bought deli items, claiming you made them. I remember you washing containers. Now, you claim Ashley's cooking as your own. How can you keep lying about something as obvious as who made the food? Is lying to your natural child a part of being a mother?
The person we thought was Madison hunched over, trembling. Had she not realized we knew? Wyatt continued.
When you said you wouldn't approve the marriage unless we lived with you, I seriously considered a runaway marriage. You probably thought, with Dad's small inheritance gone, you needed me as a new golden goose. From our perspective, you're a complete stranger. If the house was gone, so would you. But then Ashley agreed to live together. She was loved by her parents, and I, despite being served deli items, was grateful for your care from my first year of high school to grad school. Even if you were living off Dad's inheritance. Once married, Ashley was forced to cook and do laundry, and you claimed it was your work. You're not family. You come from another home, so you don't know our rules. You bullied her just like Mom, without teaching the house rules. Seeing this, I decided to corner you thoroughly. Dad's will stated she will be like a mother from now on and avenge Samantha. I found a way to fulfill these seemingly contradictory requests. From my first year of high school to grad school, 9 years. I've supported you financially, even lived with you after marriage, but today marks the end of those 9 years. Regardless of the circumstances, today ends my gratitude for you acting as a mother. And as for avenging, that starts today. From today, I'll no longer recognize you as family. Naturally, as a stranger, you'll also need to leave the house.
Just wait a minute, really.
Dad never married you because of all this.
Wyatt stated firmly. A moment of silence followed. Wyatt must have been carrying various burdens since Samantha's passing. Today, everything was about to change. But I couldn't let the pressure of this change defeat us, so I gave his back a firm pat.
Hey.
He turned around.
Samantha might have been tormented by this person,
I said, pointing again at the vital records.
But I won't fall ill. I won't be brought down by this. And I'll make you happy, compensating for the loss of Samantha. Just leave it to me.
Wyatt cracked a gentle smile. The kind I hadn't seen before. So, Madison, or rather the stranger she truly was, ended up taken away by the police, as no one would take her in. It seems she was detained for a while. Later, she did come back, begging to be let in, but Wyatt resolutely refused to open the door. Being a habitual shoplifter, with no nearby supermarkets left to use, Madison moved far away. We received a message from her about her move and sent her belongings, postage due, to a very distant place, 3 states away. Years passed since then. We now have 2 children, and our life is serene. The reason I'm recounting this story now is that yesterday Wyatt suddenly started speaking out of nowhere.
By the way,
He said.
there was another reason behind my name.
He prefaced.
It's probably not a big deal.
Then started his story.
The year I was born, John Wayne passed away. Dad, a fan of westerns, wanted to name me John, but Mom, who had her quirks, didn't want to settle for just John. Instead, she thought of a western hero. Wyatt Earp!
I burst out laughing.
That must have been the main reason for the name.
I just love this natural side of Wyatt. A quiet man doesn't have to be boring. With Wyatt and our children, our life ahead holds no tears. Only smiles for tomorrow.
My husband is out on a shopping trip right now.
When we visited our eldest son's apartment to celebrate our first grandchild's birth, the door was opened by his wife, who did not hide her annoyance and frowned as she tried to close the door. In a panic, I handed over a $3,000 gift for the celebration.
If there's anything I can help with, just say it. Things might have changed since our time, but I want to support you as much as I can.
Raising a child is very hard. I said this hoping to lighten the load for my eldest son's wife, Elizabeth, but it backfired.
Don't act all high and mighty, we're cutting ties with in-laws like you.
Elizabeth shouted and threw the gift envelope I had just handed her into the trash bin by the entrance. My husband and I were speechless at her actions. Elizabeth glared at us fiercely.
I didn't want to hear such nonsense, that's why I didn't invite you. But he invited you without asking me.
It seemed that Donald had unilaterally decided to allow our visit. Elizabeth was unforgiving and started to complain about our son.
It's unbelievable to invite people home without my consent. Donald is so useless. I made him go shopping on purpose, thinking he would let you in if he was here.
After saying this, she emphatically told us never to come again and closed the front door. Then immediately, we heard the sound of the lock. I could no longer think of my eldest son's wife, who had insulted our son and trampled over our feelings of celebration as family. Overwhelmed with irritation, we decided to cut ties with her. My name is Madison. I've been married to Jeffrey for over 30 years, and we're still close. After our marriage, we had our eldest son, Donald. 2 years later, George, our second son, was born. On holidays, my outdoorsy husband would plan hiking and camping trips for the whole family. Hiking is tiring but gives a satisfying sense of fatigue. I had a blessed life, both in my career and personal life. But life changes. Once our sons started working, Donald and George moved out for solo living one after another. I felt indescribable loneliness as the frequency of direct or even written conversations with my sons, who I used to talk to every day, decreased. Perhaps thinking of me, or maybe feeling lonely himself, my husband invited me to hiking. We hadn't been to the mountains since our sons became university students, but after this event, we often went hiking together. After a few months, we began to settle into our new life. Our sons started contacting us more frequently, and about once every 2 months, they would come home. Though life had changed from when we lived with our sons, it felt right. The loneliness faded, and my husband and I started to enjoy our life as a couple. As our sons approached the age we were when we got married, Jeffrey and I reminisced about our past and discussed their futures. We only had boys, right? I always dreamed of getting along with our sons' wives like real daughters, going to cafes and shopping together.
That would be nice. I want to take my grandkids to hiking. Gotta stay healthy and illness-free.
We shared our dreams, eagerly awaiting good news from our sons. Then, about a year later, our eldest son, now in his 4th year working as a professional, informed us he got a girlfriend. That day, my husband and I celebrated with a drink, overjoyed by the news. But since then, Donald stopped coming home, wanting to know who his partner was and longing to see our son happy. "When will you come home next?" I reached out several times asking. He would reply, "Maybe next holiday." But it never happened. On the day, a message would come. "Sorry, can't make it." And both my husband and I were disappointed again and again. He must really enjoy being with her girlfriend. I remember when Jeffrey and I first dated, I couldn't get enough of being with him. I said this to myself, convincing myself to wish happiness for Donald and his partner, and began to look forward to building a mother-daughter-like relationship with my son's wife. Half a year later, Donald finally brought his girlfriend home. They were planning to get married and came to greet us. My husband and I tried to contain our excitement, eagerly awaiting the day. But when we met Elizabeth, Donald's girlfriend, there was an indescribable atmosphere. At first, I thought she was just nervous, but her words hinted at some hostility. "Elizabeth, please take good care of Donald. If you ever need anything, just let us know." Even though I said this with a smile, Elizabeth did not smile back. Instead, "We'll manage on our own," she coldly replied. The mood was far from cordial, and Donald sighed. Eventually, after about an hour, the two of them left. "They're just independent. That's a good thing," my husband said, trying to cheer me up. "They're not children anymore. Let's just watch over them." "Yes, you're right. They'll have to live their lives together, after all." Disappointed, I decided to step back and support them from afar. After discussing with my husband, we decided to give them $10,000 as a wedding gift. When we made the deposit, Donald called to thank us. "Thanks for the money. We'll use it for the wedding." "Is the wedding planning going smoothly? Elizabeth, would she like to wear my wedding dress?" I had bought a wedding dress for my own wedding. Though I'd hoped to pass it on to a daughter, I thought it would be nice if my son's wife could wear it. "I'll ask her. Send me a picture of the dress." So I took out the stored dress, took a photo, and sent it. But soon after, we received a refusal. "She's already chosen a dress she wants to wear." Of course, there are preferences in dress design and style. I was a bit disappointed, but what could be done? "That's fine. If there's anything else we can help with, just let us know," I replied. But again, a disheartening response came. "We're handling everything ourselves." Indeed, a wedding is for the couple themselves. Still, feeling excluded, I couldn't help but worry. With a heavy heart, I attended my eldest son's wedding. The ceremony, enveloped in happiness, concluded smoothly. The reception was lively, with delicious food, and Donald looked very happy. Seeing my eldest son like that eased my anxiety. After changing outfits, the newlyweds went around for photos. Elizabeth, unlike when she first greeted us, was all smiles. At the bride's side, they posed for many photos, so I looked forward to our turn. But when Elizabeth reached us, "What's the next pose?" the photographer asked her. "We're moving to the next table," she replied. I was shocked. Seeing my reaction, Elizabeth gave me a cold look and said sharply, "The star of the wedding is me. I don't have time to fuss over the in-laws." And with that, she quickly moved on to the next table. As if I wasn't feeling low enough, another shock awaited me. Elizabeth was pregnant and would be having their first child in 6 months. It was certainly joyful news, but I learned of it through the words of the ceremony's MC. Looking around, it seemed Elizabeth's parents and relatives already knew. In contrast, we and the other relatives on the groom's side were visibly surprised. "Why didn't you tell us?" I couldn't contain my feelings and asked Donald. without any sign of regret.
Elizabeth didn't want to tell anyone outside of those she's close with.
My eldest son said. That we, soon-to-be family, were not considered close was astonishing to me. I could barely stand.
Pregnancy can upset hormonal balance, causing irritability. I read it in a comic. It must be why Elizabeth's been so harsh.
George kindly tried to console me, seeing how upset I was since the photo session. I had felt a distance from Elizabeth since she first greeted us, but still hoped we could gradually become closer and build a good relationship. I didn't want to give up on our relationship with Elizabeth. But maybe it was impossible. My faint hope of getting along well with Elizabeth vanished entirely. And after the wedding, we barely communicated with the newlywed couple as days passed. Worried about Donald's absence, George occasionally visited us. 6 months after the wedding, we got a message from our eldest son.
The baby was born.
The photo sent with the message showed a small baby wrapped in a blanket. Though I hadn't been involved and did not feel like I became a grandparent, I still wanted to celebrate. When I expressed our desire to visit, Donald quickly invited us over, and my husband and I headed to their apartment the next holiday. But when we arrived at the appointed time, our son was out.
Donald has gone shopping.
Elizabeth, opening the door, didn't hide her annoyance and frowned as she tried to close the door. In a hurry, I handed her a $3,000 celebration gift.
If there's anything we can help with, just say it. Things have changed since our time, but we want to offer whatever support we can.
Child-rearing is very hard. I said this hoping to lessen Elizabeth's burden, but it backfired.
Don't act all high and mighty. We're cutting ties with in-laws like you.
Elizabeth yelled and threw the gift envelope I had just handed her into the trash bin by the entrance. My husband and I were speechless at her actions. Elizabeth glared at us.
I didn't want to hear such nonsense, that's why I didn't invite you. But he invited you without asking me.
It must have been Donald's decision to allow our visit. Elizabeth seemed unforgiving, starting to complain about our son.
It's unbelievable to invite people home without my consent. He's so useless. I made him go shopping on purpose, thinking he would let you in if he was here.
Hearing the true feelings of my son's wife, I was dumbfounded. Taking advantage of our silence, she continued.
I'll tell Donald you saw the baby and left in a hurry. Please don't come again. It's a nuisance.
As Elizabeth was saying this,
wait!
She ignored my voice and closed the front door. Then, I heard the sound of the lock being engaged. I realized I was clenching my fists tightly, shocked by what just happened in front of me. My husband didn't say anything, but it was clear he was angry. We could no longer think of Elizabeth, who had called our son useless and trampled on our feelings of celebration, as family. Frustrated, we decided to cut ties with her. After that, there was no contact from Donald for 6 months. Though we had cut ties with our eldest son, our younger son George introduced us to his girlfriend Stella, and they started visiting our home occasionally. Initially wary because of Elizabeth, I gradually warmed up to Stella, who always greeted me with a smile. Eventually, they got married. They even considered moving in with us, thinking about our future.
My mom and grandmother were very close. I hope to have a similar relationship with Madison,
Stella told me. I was so moved I almost cried. Seeing my reaction, my husband said,
we would love that.
And so, we decided to live together with our son and his wife. At the wedding, Stella wore my wedding dress. Both she and her parents
Thank you for letting me wear such a beautiful dress.
Thanked me. While feeling happy, I couldn't help but be disappointed with my eldest son and his wife's behavior. Elizabeth seemed to be in a bad mood at the celebration and ignored us throughout. Donald didn't do anything about her behavior. I was only worried if our younger son and his wife were upset by their attitude. But, to our relief, they looked happy after the ceremony.
Thank you for yesterday. It was a wonderful memory,
Stella said to me with a smile the next day. Later, Stella became pregnant, and I took over the household chores, thinking of her burden. But whenever I looked away, Stella would try to help.
Stella, please rest. I'll handle it. Madison, you're too protective. I'm fine with doing this much.
While having such exchanges, I felt happy living with my son, his wife, and my husband. That day, my husband and George went hiking together, and we were having a relaxed time. Then, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Elizabeth and a young girl who had attended George's wedding. I hadn't been told anything at the wedding, but seeing the girl who resembled Donald, I was sure she was his child. The girl seemed not to recognize me and hid behind Elizabeth, looking scared.
It's been a while, Madison. Good to see you're well.
Contrary to her past behavior, Elizabeth greeted me politely. Then she started.
Well,
she began to tell her story.
Life has become tough recently, and I came to ask for support.
Support?
Yes. I quit my job because things weren't going well with my boss. But right after I resigned, Donald was fired. His salary was cut, and he was almost transferred to a subsidiary, so he quit too.
Donald tried to find another job but hasn't secured a stable position yet, leaving them both essentially unemployed. Elizabeth had suggested to Donald to ask us for support, but our son apparently refused. After quitting her job without consulting and finding out Donald was fired, Elizabeth called him useless. Donald seemed to be quite angry with her for that. Since then, Donald, who had always followed Elizabeth's lead, started to defy her.
That's why I came here directly,
she said with a troubled look. But all I wanted to say was, so what? From our conversation, it was clear that her attitude was the reason things didn't work out with her boss, and I could understand why our eldest son was angry with her. It was too convenient for her to seek help only when in trouble, especially after she caused us to sever ties. But she was desperate for my sympathy.
I even asked my parents, but they refused any financial help. You're the only ones I can turn to. We'll starve at this rate,
Elizabeth pleaded with teary eyes.
Please help us.
However, my heart remained unmoved. I refuse.
Why? It's all because Donald quit his job. As parents, shouldn't you feel responsible and help?
Responsible? You're adults, sort your own issues. You're the ones who cut ties, remember? We're saving money for Stella's pregnancy and our soon-to-be-born grandchild. We have no money to spare for you.
What? That's ridiculous.
Her weak demeanor changed instantly. The moment I refused, Elizabeth raised her voice.
Why support your younger son's wife and not help us?
At this moment, I was approached from behind.
Madison, are you okay?
Worried that I hadn't returned, Stella had come to the entrance. Seeing Stella, Elizabeth's face turned red with anger.
You're living together, too. That's not fair. I'm the wife of the eldest son. It's wrong for the wife of the younger son to move in. Get out.
Startled by the sudden shouting, Stella tensed up.
It's you who should leave this place.
I immediately stepped forward to defend Stella.
Stella proposed living together, considering our future. Unlike you, who only think of yourself. What? Just because I treated you a bit harshly, you favor her? Fine, if you don't support us, you'll never see this child again.
With those words, Elizabeth forcefully pushed a hidden girl to the front. Seeing the girl on the verge of tears, I felt something snap inside me. You're really the worst kind of person.
Huh? Say whatever you want. I've always disliked your preachy attitude. If you care about the child, don't use her as a tool. If you don't change your ways, we'll cut ties with you. Don't ever come to our house again. Don't joke with me, you miser.
Even after this, Elizabeth continued to fuss, using her daughter to sway us, but I never nodded in agreement. Though I thought to let her rant as she pleased, seeing the girl scared by Mom's yelling, I decided to take a drastic action.
If you stay any longer, I'll call the police. Leave quickly if you don't want to make a big deal out of this.
At the mention of the police, Elizabeth, who had been bustling about, stopped talking and left with a look of despair. Later, I heard that Donald and Elizabeth were struggling to find new jobs. Despite finding each other's presence intolerable, they couldn't afford to separate due to lack of assets, and so they were stuck together. They were always fighting. And their bad reputation spread in the neighborhood. They were even reported to the child welfare office, concerned about the bad influence on the child. For the child's sake, my husband and I are considering taking her in. Several months later, Stella safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Since her parents' home was far away, Stella didn't go back, so I dedicated myself to supporting her. George and my husband dote on her.
When she grows up, the 5 of us will go hiking together.
They are excited about it. I am committed to doing everything I can to ensure this happiness continues.